My name is Edward Hayes, and I am 65 years old. I am not a man of great fame or accomplishment. I have never stood on a grand stage, nor have I traveled far from the quiet town where I was born. For most of my life, I have worked with wood, simple pieces of oak, pine, and cedar. I have built tables, repaired chairs, fixed doors, and restored the memories families thought they had lost. I always felt that my hands told my story better than my voice ever could. For many years, my life was steady, predictable, peaceful. I woke up early, drank my tea by the window, and spent my days in my small workshop. I never imagined that the later years of my life, the years when most people slow down, would bring me the greatest heartbreak I had ever felt. And yet, they did. The story I am about to share is not easy for me to tell. It is a story about trust and betrayal, about love and disappointment, about a father and a son. It is a story about how my own child, the boy I raised with every beat of my heart, tried to take everything I had built, my business, my home, my name, my quiet dignity. When this truth came to me, I did not shout. I did not break. I did not even cry. I simply sat down. The weight of it settled slowly, like snow falling on a quiet morning. I let the truth find its place inside me, because sometimes the truth does not come to destroy you. Sometimes it comes to guide you toward the moment you need most. And as strange as it sounds, it was the truth that ultimately shattered every part of his plan. This is my story. A story I never thought I would have to tell, but one I hope will reach someone who needs to hear it. I remember the morning when I first felt something was wrong. It was early, just after sunrise. The house was filled with a soft, pale light. The pines outside my window were covered with dew, their branches hanging low. There was a familiar silence in the air, but it felt different somehow, as though the quiet itself was trying to tell me something. I made my tea the same way I have done for years. Warm water, a spoonful of honey, a slow stir to calm the morning chill. As I sat at the table, I felt a heaviness in my chest. I could not explain it. It wasn't pain, it wasn't fear. It was something quieter, something deeper. A feeling that something in my life was shifting in a direction I could not yet see. I remember thinking, maybe I'm just getting older. Maybe this is what age feels like. But it was not age. It was not tiredness. It was the first whisper of truth slowly making its way toward me. I did not know then that my son, my only child, had been working behind my back. I did not know he had been talking to banks, signing papers, reaching out to developers, and planning to take full control of my business, and then my home. I did not know that he had been painting me as a tired old man who could no longer think clearly, a man who was forgetful and unfit to manage things. I knew none of this. All I felt was a quiet warning inside me, a stillness that did not feel like peace, but a pause before a storm. That morning, I finished my tea, rested my hands on the wooden table I had built with my wife many years ago, and told myself it was just another ordinary day. I was wrong. The truth was already moving toward me, slow, quiet, and unstoppable. Before everything fell apart, my life was simple. I lived in a small house at the edge of town, a place where the roads curved gently and the neighbors always waved when they saw you. My house was modest, but it was filled with years of memories. My wife, Emma, had spent her entire life turning plain rooms into warm spaces that felt like home. Even after she passed away, the warmth she created never fully left. Our son, Mark, grew up in that house, I held him the day he was born. I taught him how to walk, how to read, and later, how to sand a piece of wood without rushing. When he was little, he used to follow me around the workshop, asking questions about every tool, every board, every project. He had a curious mind back then, a gentle heart, a shy smile. I thought he would always stay that way. When my wife passed, 12 years ago now, it was Mark who moved back home to help me cope. He was 30 at the time, still trying to build his own path in life. Those months brought us closer. We cooked simple meals together. We talked late into the evening. Sometimes we sat in silence on the porch, just listening to the wind pass through the trees. For a long while, I believed we were healing together. Eventually, he returned to his life in the city, but we stayed close. He called often. He visited on weekends. And every time he sat at our old kitchen table, I felt the same pride I felt the day he was born. So when he told me, years later, that he wanted to help me run the carpentry business, my heart softened. I welcomed him with open arms. I thought, this is what every father hopes for, to pass on his work to his child. I did not know then that his ambitions were growing faster than his gratitude. The business we built. The workshop behind my house has been my second home for more than 40 years. It smells of sawdust, varnish, and old memories. Every corner holds a story. Every crack in the floor was earned through years of standing, bending, lifting, sanding, cutting, and repairing. I built that shop with my own hands, and for decades, the people in our town trusted it. They trusted me. They brought me broken rocking chairs from their grandparents. They brought me doors that wouldn't close. They brought me tables that held the laughter of entire generations. And I took care of everything with patience and respect. When Mark joined, I was hopeful. I wanted to teach him not just the craft, but the responsibility behind it. For a while, things were good. He learned quickly. He spoke to clients kindly. He worked beside me with interest and energy. I thought, my boy is ready. My legacy is safe. But life changes slowly at first. Then suddenly, the first signs of distance. When I look back now, I can see the small signs. Signs that I ignored because a father always wants to believe the best about his child. There was the day he insisted on taking over the bookkeeping. "It'll make things easier, Dad," he said with a smile. "I'll help you stay organized." Then there was the time he redesigned our business cards without asking me. His name appeared in large, bold letters. Mine was printed beneath it in smaller font. "It looks modern," he said. "Clients like this style now." I told myself it didn't matter. He was young. He understood new trends better than I did. Then he started meeting clients without me, taking calls in the other room, spending long hours outside the workshop, coming home late. When I asked him about it, he always gave the same answer. "Dad, things are changing. Trust me, I'm handling it." Slowly, the conversations between us grew shorter. Breakfasts became silent. He stopped asking for advice. He stopped touching the tools with the same care. I told myself he was just stressed, that the business was growing, that he needed space to prove himself. But the silence between us was growing deeper. The night everything shifted. It was quiet that evening. The sky outside was dark, painted with clouds that hinted at rain. I had misplaced one of my old chisels earlier in the day, and after dinner, I decided to go to the workshop to look for it. When I opened the door, I heard soft clicking. A keyboard. Fast typing. The lights were off, except for the pale glow of the computer screen. Mark was sitting there, leaning forward, completely absorbed in what he was doing. I stepped inside slowly so I wouldn't startle him. The floor creaked, and he turned sharply, his eyes wide for a moment. "Dad, what are you doing here?" he asked. His voice sounded tight, uneasy, not like himself. "I just came to find my chisel," I said gently. "What are you working on?" He hesitated, just for a second. But that second felt like a cold draft slipping under the door. Then he closed whatever document he had open. "Just business stuff," he replied. "Nothing important." His voice was calm, too calm, as if he wanted the moment to end quickly. I nodded and pretended not to notice. But something inside me felt different. It was the first time I sensed that he was no longer walking beside me, but ahead of me. And I was not sure he wanted me to follow. That night, after leaving the workshop, I went back into the house with the chisel in my hand. But my mind stayed behind, still inside that room with the glow of the computer screen and the tight expression on my son's face. I sat down on the edge of my bed and looked at my hands. Hands that had built a life. Hands that had held my son when he was small. Hands that now trembled, not from age, but from something I had no name for yet. I told myself I was imagining it, that maybe Mark was just tired, that maybe he didn't want me to worry. I tried to push it away, but something quiet and persistent kept whispering inside me. "Something is wrong, Edward." I tried to sleep, but my thoughts wouldn't settle. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the way he clicked off the screen so quickly. I saw the way his shoulders tightened when he heard me. I saw a distance in his eyes that I hadn't recognized before. By morning, I convinced myself that I needed to trust him. He was my son, after all, my only child. The boy I raised with patience and love. The boy who once clung to my hand when crossing the street. But trust doesn't stop a storm from coming. The business starts to shift. In the days that followed, the workshop felt different. Mark spent less time beside me and more time on the phone. Long calls, quiet whispers, quick steps outside whenever I approached. Clients who used to look for me started asking for him instead. "Is Mark around?" He said he'd handle everything. At first, I felt proud. Proud that people trusted him. Proud that he was stepping forward. I thought, maybe this is what growth looks like. Maybe this is how the business changes hands across generations. But then, small things began to slip through. Mark stopped telling me about new projects. Invoices became numbers I didn't recognize. Tools were moved without explanation. Decisions were made without me. When I asked questions, he always gave short answers. "It's fine, Dad. I have it under control. You don't need to worry." He said it with a calmness that felt more like dismissal than reassurance. I started feeling like a guest in my own workshop. The documents I wasn't meant to see. One afternoon, Mark rushed out of the shop to take a call. He left the computer open. I didn't mean to look. I want to make that clear. I was not searching for secrets. I simply went to tidy the workbench, as I always did. But when I turned around, the computer screen was glowing. A document was open. And my name. My name was printed in bold letters across legal pages I had never seen before. I leaned closer, squinting. My eyes aren't as sharp as they used to be, but I could still make out the words. Transfer of ownership. Primary decision-making rights. Authority reassignment. And then, below that, a description of my health. False descriptions. Cold sentences about my declining mental clarity, about my increasing forgetfulness, about my inability to manage daily operations. I felt something inside me stop, The room didn't spin. The air didn't break. It was quieter than that. Much quieter. It felt like someone had placed a heavy cloth over my heart, muffling everything inside me. I sat down slowly, resting my hands on my knees, trying to understand. Why would my son write things like this? Why would he try to declare me unfit? I wasn't perfect, but I was still capable. I could still lift wood. I could still measure, cut, and build. My mind, though slower at times, was clear. So why would he say otherwise? I stared at the screen for a long time. I didn't touch anything. I didn't scroll. I didn't take a picture. I just sat there, breathing quietly, feeling something break in a way that didn't make a sound. When Mark came back into the workshop, he saw me near the computer. For a moment, his face froze. "Dad, what are you doing?" His tone wasn't worried. It was sharp, defensive. "I was just tidying," I said softly. "You left the computer open." He moved quickly and shut the window without meeting my eyes. "You shouldn't be snooping around," he said. The word snooping cut deeper than he realized. I wasn't snooping. I was stumbling into a truth that no father should ever have to face. But I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse him. I simply nodded and walked toward the door. He didn't follow me. The distance widens after that. Something in the house felt different. He moved more carefully around me, as though he was afraid I would see something again. And I, in turn, found myself moving more quietly, questioning every sound, every shift in tone, every passing glance. In the evenings, we used to sit on the porch together. We had a simple routine. I'd bring out 2 cups of warm tea, and we would sit in silence, watching the sun lower behind the hills. But slowly, those evenings disappeared. "I have work to finish. I'm heading out. I might be late tonight." Night after night, I sat alone with 2 cups on the table. One warm, one untouched. I told myself he was busy. I told myself he was stressed. I told myself that maybe the business was changing and I needed to step back. But there is a kind of loneliness that grows inside you when someone you love is near you, yet far away. A quiet reminder from the past. One afternoon, I was cleaning an old shelf when I found a small wooden car. A toy I made for Mark when he was 6. It was rough and unpolished, but he had loved it. He used to run around the house pretending it was the fastest car in the world. I held that toy in my palm for a long time. It felt warm, even though the room was cool. I whispered to the empty room, "Where did my boy go?" But no answer came. The past had turned into a memory I could hold, while the present was something I didn't understand anymore. The meeting at the bank. The next moment that changed everything happened at the bank. I had gone to deposit a small check from a repair job, something I still did personally because it gave me a sense of routine, of purpose. When I handed the check to the teller, she smiled politely before her expression shifted. "Mr. Hayes? Yes? Is your son handling all business accounts now?" I blinked, unaware of what she meant. "My son helps me, yes, but I still manage things." She hesitated. Then she said carefully, "We received documents last month stating that he has full authority." Full authority. The words struck hard. I felt the room tilt slightly. I gripped the counter to steady myself. "I never signed anything," I whispered. She looked uncomfortable. "I'm not allowed to discuss the details without your son present. That's what the documents say." I stood there, feeling as though my voice had been taken away. My son had gone to the bank without telling me, had presented papers without me. had declared himself the sole authority over the business I built with my hands. I thanked the teller softly and walked outside. The sun was bright that day, but I felt cold. The air felt thin. The world felt slightly tilted, as if I was walking on uneven ground. I sat on a bench outside the bank and watched cars pass by. Everything suddenly made sense. The calls, the documents, the silence, the distance. He had been planning this, quietly, carefully, steadily. And I had been too trusting to see it. The quiet dinner that evening, I made dinner. A simple soup, soft bread. It was the kind of meal my wife used to make when she sensed something was wrong. Mark came home late. He looked tired, but not in the way work tires you, more like someone carrying a secret. "Dinner's on the table," I said. He nodded and sat down. We ate in silence. After a long moment, I said softly, "I went to the bank today." His spoon froze midway. "Oh?" "Yes. They said you handled some documents there." He didn't answer right away. His jaw tightened slightly. "It was just paperwork," he said. "Nothing you needed to worry about." I took a slow breath. "Mark, am I being pushed out of my own business?" He looked up just for a second, then back at his bowl. "You're getting older, Dad. I'm trying to help. I'm planning for the future." "But without me?" I asked gently. He did not respond. Silence filled the room again, and in that silence I felt something inside me begin to shift. Not anger, not bitterness, just a quiet realization. The boy I raised with love had become someone I barely recognized. That night after dinner, I sat in the living room long after Mark had gone to bed. The house felt heavy with unspoken words. The walls, once so warm, now felt like they were listening to a story they didn't want to hear. I sat in my old chair, the one my wife used to rest beside when she read her evening books. I remembered how she used to say, "Edward, homes can sense sadness. They hold it for us when we're too tired." Maybe she was right. Maybe the house had been sensing things long before I did. I leaned back and closed my eyes. I wasn't angry. Anger was too loud for what I felt. What I felt was quieter. A slow ache spreading through my chest. A sense of grief, not for something lost, but for something changing in a way I could no longer stop. I whispered into the silence, "Why didn't you just talk to me, son?" But the house gave no answer. Work becomes a stranger to me. The next morning, I woke up early as always. The sky was soft and gray. The kind of sky that makes you feel small, but safe. I walked to the workshop, hoping that routine would steady me. When I opened the door, I stopped. My workbench, my sanctuary, was moved. Tools were shifted. Papers I kept neatly stacked were placed in a drawer without my knowing. And there, on the wall, was a new schedule printed in large letters. "Do not adjust without Mark's approval." Those words hit me the same way the bank teller's words had. Slow but sharp. The workshop had always been an extension of my hands, a place where time slowed, where memories lingered in the smell of wood and varnish. Now it felt like a room I was borrowing. Mark arrived a few minutes later. He walked in briskly, holding his phone, already in the middle of a conversation. "Yes, I understand the deadline. No, I'll handle the signatures. Yes, my father knows I'm transitioning into full control. Yes, it's necessary." He paused when he saw me. "Dad, I'm on a call. I'll be done soon." He turned away, but I had already felt the sting. My father knows I'm transitioning into full control. But I didn't know. Not really. not in the ways that mattered. I stood there, feeling like a quiet shadow in my own space. A client's visit that said too much. Later that week, Mrs. Green, a long-time client, came to the workshop with a small wooden box her husband had made years ago. She wanted it restored. "Oh, Ed, I'm so glad you're here," she said warmly. I smiled back. "Of course. I'm always happy to help." But before I could take the box from her, Mark stepped in quickly. "Actually, Mrs. Green, I'll handle this one. Dad isn't managing these kinds of repairs anymore." Her eyes widened in surprise. "Oh, I didn't know," she said, turning to me. I forced a gentle smile. "It's all right," I whispered, but she kept looking at me with a puzzled, almost sympathetic expression. Mark walked her to the counter, speaking confidently, while I stepped back, feeling like a bystander in the life I had lived for decades. When she left, I touched the workbench lightly, grounding myself. The wood felt colder that day. The man from the developer company. Not long after, a well-dressed man visited the workshop. He introduced himself as Mr. Collins from a development firm that had recently bought land in the area. "I'm here to meet your son," he said politely. "He told me to stop by today." "About what?" I asked softly. "Oh, the acquisition process," he said. "Acquisition?" He paused, realizing he had said too much. "Your son didn't tell you?" he asked carefully. "No," I replied, just as carefully. "Oh, well, I'm sure he will." He adjusted his briefcase nervously and stepped outside to make a phone call. I stood there, feeling something heavy press deeper into my chest. Acquisition, process, developer. Words that didn't belong to my quiet world. Words that belonged to a plan I was clearly not meant to see. The evening I finally asked that night. I waited for Mark at the dinner table. I warmed the food twice. I checked the window every few minutes. He arrived just past 9. "Long day?" I asked quietly as he washed his hands. "Very," he replied. We sat down. I waited for him to take a few bites before speaking. "Mark, who was the man from the development company?" He froze. "Dad, I don't want to talk about work at dinner." "But I think I deserve to know," I said softly. "Please." He sighed, pushing his plate away. "Fine. They're offering a good deal for the property, the workshop, the land, everything. It's a chance to modernize, to build something new." I blinked slowly. "Sell everything?" "Yes," he said bluntly. "It's time." "Time for what?" I whispered. "For you to retire," he replied. The words that wounded me. I looked at him quietly. His face was firm, almost determined. "Retire?" I echoed. I didn't say I was ready. "You don't have to say it," he replied. "I can see it. You're slowing down. You forget things. It's better this way." "Forget things?" I shook my head gently. "Mark, I'm old, yes, but I'm still capable." "Dad, this is not up for debate." The words dropped like stones. Not up for debate. He wasn't asking me. He wasn't discussing with me. He had already decided. I looked at him quietly for a long time, searching for the boy I once knew. The boy who used to sit on my shoulders. The boy who used to run into my arms. The boy who once begged me to stay with him when he had nightmares. That boy was gone. In his place was a man who spoke in sharp lines, who saw me not as his father, but as an obstacle. I nodded slowly. "I hear you," I said. But inside, something tender was breaking. The whisper of my wife's memory. Later that night, when the house fell quiet, I sat by the old window where my wife used to plant her flowers. I spoke softly, as if she could still hear me. "Emma, what do I do? Our son is slipping away from me." For a moment, I almost felt like she was beside me, not in sight, but in presence, a calmness, a softness, a reminder. She used to say, "Edward, truth can be a quiet companion, and quiet companions have a way of revealing themselves when you need them most." Maybe she was right. Maybe the truth was not something I needed to run from, but something I needed to walk toward, even if it hurt. The break in our routine. The next morning, I woke up determined to reclaim a small piece of my life. I walked to the workshop before sunrise. I opened the windows. I let the morning light spill onto the floor. I touched each tool slowly, reminding myself of the work that shaped me. When Mark arrived, he looked surprised. "Dad, what are you doing?" "Working," I said simply. "You don't need to." "I want to," I interrupted gently. He sighed as though my desire to work was an inconvenience. "We have new systems now, Dad. New processes. I need you to step back." I turned to him quietly. "Mark, this workshop is not just a business. It is my life. I need it." He didn't respond. Instead, he checked something on his phone and walked away. That small moment said so much. He wasn't listening. Not really. And I realized, if I wanted to understand the full truth, I would have to find it myself. The conversation with an old friend. Later that day, Tom, a longtime friend and former client, stopped by. He looked around the workshop with a kind smile. "Ed, I've missed this place," he said. "So have I replied softly. He lowered his voice. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Did you approve the plans your son showed around town? The ones about selling this property?" My heart slowed. "No," I said. "I didn't approve anything." He nodded sadly. "I thought so." Then he placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Ed, people in town are talking. They think you're stepping down willingly. They think you're unwell." Unwell. The word echoed inside me like a hollow drum. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the truth seep in. Mark hadn't only changed the business. He had changed how people saw me. Slowly, carefully, quietly, he had been rewriting my story. Tom's words stayed with me long after he left the workshop. Unwell. People think you're unwell. The idea settled into my chest, like a weight I couldn't lift. Not because it was true, but because someone had gone out of their way to paint that picture. Someone who shared my name, my blood, my memories, my son. I walked slowly back into the house, my steps heavy. I sat at the old kitchen table, the same table where my wife used to set warm meals, where Mark once drew pictures with crayons while I sanded pieces of wood nearby. I ran my fingers across the surface, feeling the grooves and scratches, each one a memory of a day long gone. For a moment, I closed my eyes. I remembered a younger Mark tugging on my sleeve, saying, "Dad, look, I made a boat." I remembered his laughter filling the house. I remembered him falling asleep on my chest when thunderstorms frightened him. And now he was telling a town I loved that I was losing my mind. I breathed in slowly, letting the ache settle. This wasn't just about business anymore. This wasn't just ambition. This was a rewriting of who I was, and that was something I could not ignore. The letter in the mailbox. A few days later, as I walked out to check the mail, I noticed an envelope with an unfamiliar stamp. It looked official, heavy, cold. When I opened it, my hands trembled. It was a notice from a legal office, a request for a meeting concerning the future management of my business and assets. The letter stated, "Due to recent evaluations provided by your son, Mark Hayes." Evaluations. Plural. My breath caught. How many had he given? How long had this been happening behind my back? As I read further, I felt a shiver run down my spine. There is sufficient concern regarding your decision-making ability. My heart tightened. It continued. And therefore, a transition of authority is recommended for your safety and financial protection. For my safety. For my protection. Gentle words with sharp intentions. I sat on the porch step, holding the letter loosely in my hands, the edges cutting into my skin. Inside my pocket, my phone buzzed. A message from Mark. Don't forget the meeting tomorrow. It's important. He hadn't mentioned what it was about. He hadn't warned me. He hadn't asked. I looked at the message for a long time, feeling a quiet sadness rise in my chest. Why didn't he talk to me? Why didn't he trust me? Why didn't he see me as his father anymore? The quiet before the storm. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the soft hum of the night outside. Every thought pulled me deeper into a place I didn't want to go. I thought of my wife. I thought of the family we built. I thought of the values we taught our son. Kindness, honesty, respect. Where had those values gone? Had I failed him somehow? Had grief changed him after his mother died? I tried not to blame him. I tried to understand him. But some part of me knew that understanding didn't erase the hurt. When dawn arrived, I sat up slowly. My bones felt heavier that morning. My heart even heavier. I made tea. I sat by the window. I watched the early light climb through the trees, and I whispered to myself, whatever happens today, stay calm. Because anger wouldn't solve anything. Only truth could. The meeting Mark drove us to the meeting in silence. I stared out the window, watching the town pass by. The bakery where my wife used to buy fresh bread. The park where I taught Mark to ride his first bike. The little bookstore where she and I spent lazy Sunday afternoons. All these places held pieces of us, pieces that felt painfully distant now. When we arrived at the office, the receptionist greeted us warmly, unaware of the storm quietly building. We were led to a small conference room. Inside sat two lawyers and Mr. Collins, the developer I had seen earlier. Mark shook their hands confidently, like a man who belonged there. I stood behind him, quietly. One of the lawyers smiled politely at me. Mr. Hayes, thank you for joining us. We're here to discuss the transition of your business ownership, as recommended. Recommended by whom? I asked softly. The lawyer glanced at Mark. He shifted in his seat. By your son, the lawyer said, based on the documents he submitted. I felt the air leave my lungs. I didn't approve any documents, I said gently. Mark cleared his throat. Dad, this is for the best. For who? I asked quietly. For you, he insisted. You're tired. You're slower. You forget things. I'm trying to protect what you built. The lawyer nodded as though everything made perfect sense. But inside my chest, something finally woke up. Something calm. Something steady. Something clear. For weeks I had felt lost, confused, betrayed. But now I felt the truth rising inside me like a quiet, steady flame. The moment I chose to speak, the lawyer continued explaining the transition plan, flipping through pages, pointing to lines, talking about signatures and legal transfers. I listened quietly. Then, when he slid the papers toward me, pushing a pen across the table, I placed my hand gently on top of the documents. May I see all the documents my son has submitted? I asked. The room went still. The lawyer blinked, caught off guard. Well, Yes, he said slowly. Of course, they're all here. He opened a folder thick with paperwork and handed it to me. Every page had my name on it. Every page carried lies, false claims, fabricated statements, descriptions of a man who didn't exist, a man who was confused, a man who couldn't manage simple tasks, a man who didn't recognize his own clients, a man who wasn't me. I closed the folder gently. Then I looked at Mark. Really looked at him. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Mark, I said softly, why did you do this? He shifted uncomfortably. Dad, I told you. It's for your good. For my good? I repeated. You're old, he snapped. You can't run things anymore. I'm preparing for the future. His words weren't cruel in tone, just cold, practical, emotionless. But sometimes coldness hurts more deeply than anger ever could. I nodded slowly. Then I spoke in the calmest voice I had. Son, I may be old, but I am not blind, and I am not confused, and I am not incapable. The room felt quieter than it had all morning. I know what you're doing, I continued, and I know why. He looked at me sharply. You don't understand. No, I said quietly. You don't understand. I turned to the lawyers. I have not signed any document giving him authority. I have not agreed to any transfer. And I am not unwell. Then I reached into my coat pocket and placed a small envelope on the table. Inside were letters from neighbors, clients, and friends, people who had worked with me recently, people who trusted me, people who knew I was capable. I had asked for these letters the day after Tom visited me. Quietly, carefully, truthfully. The lawyer opened the letters, reading them one by one. Mark watched, growing pale. The lawyer finally spoke. Mr. Hayes, these statements contradict the evaluations your son submitted. I nodded gently. Because his evaluations are false. Silence filled the room. Mark's face tightened. Dad, you're making this harder than it needs to be. I looked at him with all the love and pain a father's heart could hold. No, son, I said softly. You made it harder when you stopped talking to me. The shift in the room. The lawyers exchanged glances. One cleared his throat. Given this new information, he said carefully, we will need to pause all paperwork until a full review is completed. Mark shot up from his chair. You said we could finalize it today. The lawyer held up a hand. Based on what your father has shown us, we were given incomplete or misleading information. Misleading. A gentle word for betrayal. Mark stared at me, anger flashing in his eyes. You planned this, he whispered. I shook my head. No, I simply spoke the truth. He turned away, running a hand through his hair, breathing hard. And in that moment, I saw it clearly. He wasn't angry because I stopped him. He was angry because I surprised him. He had believed I would stay silent. He had counted on it. But silence can be broken, and truth, once spoken, cannot be hidden again. I will continue seamlessly in the next section. When you're ready, the air inside the conference room felt heavy, as if every word spoken had added another layer of weight to the room. The lawyers sat quietly now, their professionalism turning into a kind of awkward silence. Even Mr. Collins, the developer, shifted uncomfortably in his chair, avoiding my eyes as if the truth in them was harder to look at than anything he had read in their documents. Mark stood there, breathing hard, his shoulders tense, his jaw tight. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then he said in a voice that shook with anger he was trying to hide, "This isn't fair. You're twisting everything. You're making me look like the bad guy." I looked at him gently. "You're not a bad person, Mark," I said softly. "You are my son. I love you. But you made choices without me. Choices that hurt me. He shook his head. I was trying to help. Help, I repeated, is not done in secret. He opened his mouth but didn't speak. His eyes moved around the room, searching for support. But no one spoke for him. For the first time in weeks, I felt a kind of calm settling over me. Not victory, not triumph, just clarity, like a fog finally lifting. The lawyer closest to us cleared his throat. Given this dispute, it would be unethical for us to proceed. We'll need to pause everything until proper evaluations are done. That includes verification of Mr. Hayes's capacity. He looked at me gently. Would you be willing to undergo an independent evaluation? Of course, I said without hesitation, because I had nothing to hide. Mark let out a frustrated breath. This is ridiculous. We don't need evaluations. But the lawyer held up a hand. Mark, please. The process must be fair to both of you. Both of you. Those words mattered. For weeks, everything had been tilted in his favor. Now the ground was leveling again. The walk out of the building. When the meeting finally ended, I stood up slowly, my bones aching from sitting too long. Mark avoided my eyes. His hands trembled slightly as he grabbed his coat. We walked outside in silence. The air was cool, the sky covered in quiet gray clouds. Clouds that seemed to mirror the heaviness inside both of us. When we reached the car, Mark opened the door aggressively. I can't believe you embarrassed me like that, he muttered. I turned to him. You embarrassed yourself, son. I only showed the truth. He glared at me. You don't understand how the world works now. Things have changed. Businesses need modern leadership. Modern leadership doesn't require lies, I whispered. He slammed the car door shut and walked around to the driver's side. I got in slowly, my heart beating heavily in my chest. The drive home was silent. Only the hum of the road filled the space between us. At one point, Mark spoke through clenched teeth. You don't trust me. I looked out the window. I trusted you so much I didn't see what you were doing. He let out a bitter laugh. You're being dramatic. I shook my head softly. No, I'm being honest. When we arrived home, he parked the car harshly, got out quickly, and walked straight into the house without waiting for me. I stood outside for a moment, watching him go. The house looked the same as it always had, but it felt different. Like something warm inside it had been replaced with something colder. I took a deep breath and walked in. The quiet dinner table. Later that evening, I set the table like I always did. It felt strange, doing something so normal after a morning so heavy. But routine has a way of keeping a person grounded. I placed the bowls of soup on the table, 2 spoons, 2 glasses of water. When Mark entered the kitchen, he didn't look at me. Dinner is ready, I said softly. I'm not hungry, he replied. But he sat down anyway. We ate in silence. Halfway through the meal, I said quietly, Mark, you hurt me today. He froze but didn't respond. I spent my whole life working for you, I continued gently. Every board I hammered, every table I built, every chair I fixed. I did it to give you a better future. He looked up then, his eyes wet but angry. You think I don't know that? You act like you don't. He slammed his spoon down. I didn't want to hurt you, he snapped. But you're old, Dad. Things are different now. You're slow. You get tired. I'm just trying to make sure everything doesn't fall apart. And you thought the only way to do that, I said softly, was to take everything from me? He swallowed hard. I thought if I asked, you'd say no. So you went behind my back. He looked away. Yes. The word was small, but it echoed through me. I nodded slowly. I would have listened to you, I said. I would have talked with you. I would have considered changing things. But you didn't give me the chance. He wiped his face with the back of his hand. I thought you'd just hold me back. I sat there, letting those words sink in. After everything, after raising him, after teaching him every skill he had, after pouring my life into his, he saw me as an obstacle, a weight, a burden. I didn't cry, not then, not yet, but inside something quiet cracked. A night of empty rooms. After dinner, Mark went to his room and closed the door. The house felt colder than usual. I walked from room to room slowly. The living room where we once celebrated birthdays. The hallway where we hung our family photos. The small study where I kept letters from old clients and drawings Mark had made as a child. Every room felt like a memory trying to remind me of a time when things were simpler, when love didn't hurt so much. I sat on the porch, breathing slowly, listening to the distant hum of crickets. The night air was crisp, and I felt small under the wide sky. I thought of my wife again. She would have known what to say. She always knew how to soften moments with a gentle voice or a quiet touch. But she wasn't here, and the boy we had raised was drifting away from me. I whispered to the dark, "Where did I lose him?" But again, the night held no answers. The humbling visit to the doctor. The next day, I kept my promise. I scheduled the independent evaluation, not because I doubted myself, but because I needed to reclaim my truth. Dr. Lane, a calm and kind woman in her 50s, welcomed me with a warm smile. "Mr. Hayes, let's just talk today. Tell me about your daily life." We spoke for more than an hour. She asked questions kindly, never making me feel small. She had me do a few memory exercises, some problem-solving tasks, and even tested my reflexes. When we finished, she sat across from me and said, "Mr. Hayes, you're perfectly capable. You show no signs of cognitive decline. You're clear, steady, and thoughtful." A slow breath left me. Relief, not triumph, just relief. She handed me the written report. "A copy will be sent to the legal office," she said. "This should clear any doubts." I thanked her quietly. As I walked out of the clinic, the sun felt a little warmer. The world felt a little clearer. But I also felt a deep ache, because the person who doubted me wasn't a stranger. It was my own son. The report hits the law office 2 days later. The law office called. "Mr. Hayes, we reviewed the evaluation. Everything checks out. You remain the sole owner and operator of your business." I nodded, though no one could see me. "Thank you," I said softly. The lawyer hesitated. "Sir, I also want to say this gently. The documents your son submitted contain inaccuracies that raise concerns." Inaccuracies. A gentle word again for betrayal. I closed my eyes. "I understand," I whispered. "Would you like to pursue legal action?" he asked. I opened my eyes slowly. "Legal action? Against my own son?" "No," I said firmly. "I don't want to destroy him. I just want him to stop trying to destroy me." The lawyer respected my decision. The conversation that needed to happen that night, I knocked on Mark's door. He opened it slightly, just enough to see me. "We need to talk," I said softly. He sighed but stepped aside. I sat on his bed. He leaned against the desk. I looked at him for a long moment. "You know," I began gently, "I never wanted the business to trap you. If you wanted to modernize things, I would have listened." He said nothing. "If you wanted to take on more responsibility, I would have agreed." Still silence. If you felt I was slowing down, you could have told me directly. His eyes lifted slightly. I didn't know how, he whispered. I nodded. Son, the painful part isn't what you did. It's that you did it alone, in secret, as if I were your enemy. He swallowed hard. I was scared, he admitted. I was scared you'd say no. I was scared we'd argue. I was scared the business would fall apart if we didn't move fast. And because you were scared, I said softly, you forgot to be honest. He looked down. I'm sorry, Dad. The words were small, quiet, fragile, but they were real. I let out a breath I had been holding for weeks. I don't want to fight you, I said. I want us to work together, but that only happens with truth. He nodded slowly. I understand. And in that small moment, a crack of light appeared. Not forgiveness yet, not healing yet, but a beginning. The workshop returns to life. Weeks passed. Slowly, the workshop regained its old warmth. Clients returned. Orders increased. Mark worked beside me, not ahead of me, not behind me. One afternoon, while we were sanding a large dining table, he paused and said, Dad, can I ask you something? Of course. Why didn't you just cut me out of the business, after everything I did? I smiled softly. Because you're my son, and family doesn't break apart when someone makes a mistake. It bends, it hurts, but if we choose to fix it, it becomes stronger. He stood there quietly, absorbing those words. Then he whispered, Thank you. I nodded gently. Thank you for coming back. The letter I wrote but never gave him one night. After Mark had gone to sleep, I sat at the kitchen table with a pen and a piece of paper. I wrote a letter, not to accuse him, not to remind him of what he did, but to tell him what I had not been able to say. I wrote, My son, I am proud of you, not for your success, not for your ambition, but for your courage to admit you were wrong. I am old now, but I am not finished, and I want the time I have left to be spent beside you, not in anger, but in honesty. If you ever feel lost again, come to me. I will always listen. When I finished writing, I folded the letter carefully. I thought about giving it to him the next morning, but I didn't. Some words don't need to be spoken. Some love doesn't need to be delivered in ink. I placed the letter inside my drawer, knowing it would stay there quietly, like a memory waiting to be discovered someday. The gentle return of peace with time. The heaviness faded, not all at once, not dramatically, but slowly, like winter melting into spring. Mark and I began taking walks again in the evenings, sometimes talking, sometimes just walking in silence side by side. He began asking for advice again, asking for help, asking for guidance, and I began trusting him again. Slowly, cautiously, genuinely. The cracks in our relationship didn't disappear, but they became lines where new strength formed. The final reflection, a quiet lesson. One evening, as I sat on the porch watching the sun dip behind the hills, Mark joined me and placed a cup of warm tea beside me. Dad, he said softly, thank you for not giving up on me. I looked at him, my heart full. I never could, I whispered. You're my son. He nodded, his eyes soft. In that moment, I realized something important. Sometimes betrayal doesn't come from hate. Sometimes it comes from fear. Fear of failing, fear of disappointing, fear of not being enough. And sometimes the greatest strength we can offer is not anger, but understanding. Not shouting, but listening. Not punishment, but truth. Truth spoken gently. Truth held quietly. Truth that stands even when everything else shakes. My son tried to take everything from me. my business, my name, my independence. But in the end, it was the truth, nothing more, nothing less, that shattered his plan and brought him back to me. Ending, a soft moral. As I sit here now, with the last light of day fading and the smell of sawdust still lingering on my hands, I have learned something I wish every heart could understand. When someone you love hurts you, the easiest thing to do is close the door. But sometimes the bravest thing you can do is leave it open just a little. Not for the person they are in that moment, but for the person you believe they can still become. Forgiveness isn't fast. Healing isn't simple. Trust isn't immediate. But if you walk toward the truth, quietly, patiently, you may find that broken things can be mended, and that love, even after it bends, can still stand tall again. This is my story. A story of pain, yes, but also of redemption. And if you're listening to this now, I hope you carry with you the simple lesson it taught me. You can lose many things in life, but you should never lose the courage to speak the truth and the heart to forgive when truth is finally heard.